Welcome to the Jake for the State podcast. I'm your host, Jake Merrick, and we're going to be digging into, of course, what's happening here in Oklahoma and abroad, what's happening overseas, in particular in Iran, the latest over there, and how that might tie to what's happening here in Inola, Oklahoma. Yep, you guessed it, with the aluminum smelter plant and the ties to the UAE. You know, we often ask the question is, what does what's happening in the Middle East have to do with Oklahoma? What does a missile launched in the Persian Gulf have to do with a family in Claremore, or a machinist in Tulsa, a rancher outside of Woodward? You know, oftentimes the message is, let's focus on what's happening in the state. That's my message. That's the whole focus of this podcast, is let's focus on what's happening in our backyard, right here in the state, because everyone is obviously infatuated with national politics, global politics. It's what's, on your nightly news when you turn it on. So because of that, there is a constant call to focus on what is directly impacting you, your families, your communities, your pocketbook. Do we still say pocketbook? I need to transition from that. Your wallet. We need to think about those things that directly impact us, but oftentimes what happens over the pond, what happens overseas, it does have a direct tie. And in this unique situation, we have the United Arab Emirates with a 60% investment in the new aluminum smelter plant that's being proposed, promoted by Trump, tied to a Trump endorsement, which was received by the Mike Mazzei campaign. And so how might what is recently unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz and Iran, how will that impact Oklahoma and a governor's race and the future of a community out in Inola? That's what we're going to dig into today. Stay tuned.
This is the Jake for the State podcast, and this is the call for every red-blooded, God-fearing, liberty-loving patriot to prepare yourself, take your position, stand your ground, and advance the cause of freedom. Let's go.
All right. Of course, we're asking the question, what does Iran, the Middle East, have to do with Oklahoma? Well, potentially quite a bit. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is often assuming that world events stay overseas, especially in a global market and in a very intimately connected society, globally connected world. Oftentimes what happens overseas impacts us here directly. And so we look at fuel prices, grocery bills, manufacturing jobs, defense contracts, and Oklahoma is increasingly a significant player in all of these. So today I want to connect some of the dots with a national story in the mainstream media right now. You may have seen the headlines about Iran coming out today. It's the recent drone attacks in the Strait of Hormuz and the United States response. It seemed like we had a pretty low-key response from the president earlier today, and we'll see how that might escalate, if it escalates, if it results in further bombing of Iran, if it results in the ultimate demise of the memorandum of understanding, and how that might impact our relationship with the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and then how might that impact this aluminum smelter plant, which is so controversial already here in Oklahoma. So let's dig into it. We have the Strait of Hormuz, obviously central to this conflict in Iran, and part of this memorandum of understanding is that this strait would be opened under certain conditions, but then Iran, like an idiot, just launches a drone attack on some cargo ships attempting to cross. So this brings up the big question: how will the United States respond? All right, but let's backtrack here. So recently the Trump administration, they launched the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran. They launched a 60-day negotiation period over Iran's nuclear program, sanctions, and attempted to establish regional security. The UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, and other Gulf states, They support diplomacy, but they have expressed concern that decisions affecting their security could be made without sufficient Gulf input. They want to make sure they have a seat at the table. So we have Secretary Marco Rubio. He traveled recently across Abu Dhabi this week, largely to reassure these Gulf leaders that, number one, the U.S. remains committed to Gulf security. Number two, Iran will not be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. And number three, the Gulf partners will have a voice in any lasting agreement. The UAE, they still view Iran as an immediate military threat, as they should. And unlike the United States, they sit only 100 miles across the Persian Gulf from Iran. It's understandable why they would like to have input into this agreement. And of course, we remember just earlier this year, Iran launching a missile and drone attacks against the UAE. Shipping, of course, through the Strait of Hormuz was disrupted. Energy infrastructure throughout the Gulf came under threat. And now, because of all that, the leaders at the UAE, they're skeptical of any agreement that focuses only on uranium enrichment or sanctions relief. So what they want to see resolved is the issue surrounding Iran's ballistic missile program. You can see how the United States may be less concerned about ballistic missiles, more concerned about a nuclear threat, but those 100 miles away, they're very concerned about the ballistic missile threat. Of course, also the Iran support for regional proxy groups. These are launching attacks funded and fueled by Iran itself. And then, of course, the maritime security in the Gulf. And this brings us to the Strait of Hormuz, which remains the biggest flashpoint in this whole conflict. Iran recently, they sought greater control over traffic. That's what they were contending for in this Strait of Hormuz. And the United States responded that international waterways must remain open. Iran cannot legally impose tolls, and that freedom of navigation is non-negotiable. These are international waters, need to remain free for those in the area to ship their goods and services without tolls and without interference from Iran. So roughly 1/5, get this, of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. That's why, of course, we saw the rising oil prices and then the recent temporary relief that we're seeing because the strait has been reopened. But reports of the UAE releasing Iranian assets were denied. So recent reports claim that the UAE secretly agreed to release billions of dollars in frozen Iranian assets. Now, both governments are rejecting those reports, and now the question out there is, what does this relationship between the UAE and Iran truly look like? Is the UAE pulling back from the U.S. and seeking to align more with Iran in an attempt to establish peace and security in the region? The UAE calls these allegations entirely false, and senior U.S. officials likewise said that no such transfers had occurred. So that's good. We need clarity on those points. But the UAE looks like it may be pursuing two strategies simultaneously, strengthening the military cooperation with the U.S. and also maintaining diplomatic channels with Tehran to reduce the risk of another regional war. All right, so this reflects, of course, the broader Gulf strategy, and it brings us to a point closer to home. Would this potentially impact the aluminum smelter plant here in Oklahoma that is 60% owned by the UAE? The answer is potentially. Now, we know the bigger threat appears to be the state and the local legal and permitting fights, okay, not the UAE-U.S. tension itself. So right here at home, we have a more direct battle when it comes to this aluminum plant. The Inola project, of course, is directly tied to the Emirates Global Aluminum, which is the UAE-based company, which would own 60% of this joint venture with Century Aluminum, which would own 40%. Of course, this is a Chicago-based company, and it's a proposed $4 billion smelter that could produce, they say, about 600 tons annually and nearly double the U.S. primary aluminum output. Now, this is key. This is primary aluminum, which is historically very toxic in the production of primary aluminum. Now, how could this Iran-related tension affect it? Well, there's basically four ways it could. Number one, investor confidence. So if the US-UAE relations cool, the company that owns 60% of this, the Emirates Global Aluminum, EGA, their willingness or ability to commit capital could slow. So they're the one fronting this capital to come here. And so we got to watch the relations between the U.S. and the UAE, because that might determine how willing the EGA is willing to invest in this project. Now, of course, we got to look at the security risk. Iranian strikes reportedly damaged EGA's Tawila facility in the UAE. So this, of course, could directly impact EGA's attention, their capital, their insurance costs, their supply priorities. So how Iran decides they want to strike or not strike the UAE, and in particular EGA, hopefully you're getting these acronyms clear. EGA is the Emirates Global Aluminum. And if Iran strikes them directly in the UAE, well, of course, that's going to directly impact their ability to invest here in the United States. And of course, the strategic value may increase. So we have Middle East aluminum disruptions that could actually make a U.S.-based smelter more attractive because it reduces dependence on Gulf production and the shipping choke points. So all of this disruption in the Middle East and in the UAE and the tension between Iran and the UAE, that could actually increase the value of a U.S.-based aluminum plant. Now, we also have to look at the political scrutiny here, because the project is UAE linked and backed by major incentives. Any foreign policy tension could give opponents more ammunition. We're already seeing Oklahoma's AG, Gettner Drummond, suing to block the project, citing concerns including the UAE ties. So that's one of the primary components of this lawsuit brought by Attorney General Gettner Drummond. Also, gubernatorial candidate Gettner Drummond. So central to this whole race for governor is the aluminum smelter plant. So we're seeing directly here in Oklahoma how this geopolitical landscape might be impacting a major manufacturing investment right here in Oklahoma, which is directly tied to our governor's race here in Oklahoma. Typically, when people bring up global events, even national issues, I try to redirect them to the state and those issues that are impacting us more directly. But in this particular case, it's a very interesting unfolding of events that where the tensions in the Iran conflict, the Iran war, the Strait of Hormuz, all these things we've been hearing about on the national and global scale may have direct ties. They do have direct ties and direct influence in the outcome of our gubernatorial race here in Oklahoma. It's worth not only mentioning, but paying close attention to. I'm not sure anyone else at this point has highlighted it like I am doing today. And this is fresh news, hot off the press. The events unfolding just this morning, and we're still awaiting more clarity on the president's response to this. Will it result in more bombing? Does it mean the whole memorandum of understanding is scrapped with Iran? And then what will be Iran's response? What will they do concerning the UAE? And how will the UAE view our response to Iran? Will it cause them to pull in closer to the U.S. or distance themselves, thereby influencing this aluminum smelter plant right here in Oklahoma? And then, of course, impacting our governor's race. There's still a lot of questions that are yet to be answered, but I believe we need to have our attention on what's happening because it is directly impacting us here at home. All right, we'll dig into some more of this later, and the unfolding runoff elections and the other races besides the governor's race that are in a runoff. I'll cover all that here after the break right here on the Jake for the State podcast.
Big shout out to Stevens Trucking, family owned since 1979.
delivering top-notch freight solutions across Oklahoma and the lower 48 states. With over 350 trucks and 1,600 trailers, they offer reliable 24/7, 365 service, specializing in oil field and dry freight. They keep loads moving fast, backed by a fleet of flatbeds, dry vans, and more. Trust Stevens for on-time deliveries, cutting-edge equipment, and a team that treats you like family. Get a free quote today at stevenstrucking.com. Are you planning for a secure retirement? Then you need to meet my friend Michael McGuire, CEO of McGuire Capital Advisors. With over 30 years of experience helping Oklahomans protect and grow their wealth. From asset allocation and risk management, Michael delivers personalized solutions tailored to you. Get your complimentary consultation today. Visit McGuireCap.com or call Michael directly at 405-760-5863. That's 405-760-5863. Your confident financial future starts here. Okay, awesome. All right, guys, welcome back to the Jake for the State podcast. And we're going to dig into some of the other races here that are in runoff. One of them in particular, I just mentioned, of course, the gubernatorial race. We have Attorney General Getner Drummond and former State Senator Mike Mazie that are in a runoff now for governor. Of course, the runoff will be held August 25th. So a short time, well, 2 months for more mudslinging. Of course, that's what we all expect in one of these high-profile races, and it's unfortunate. I think everyone's tired of that. We're getting voter fatigue, political fatigue in general, which is, I believe, contributing to the low voter turnout. It would be refreshing, wouldn't it, if each candidate could just focus on their solutions, the answers to the problems in the state. But unfortunately, we get wrapped up into all of the mudslinging and the accusations, most of which you have to just ignore because they're completely baseless and manufactured, and then connected to the AI adds a whole new element to it where you don't even know if what you're seeing is real. So there's a lot of filtering that's required on our behalf. And most people are just saying, that requires way too much energy. They check out. And because of that, we're not getting the results we want or need in most of our elections. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. We have to work with what we got and encourage people to stay on board, dig. And that's one of the reasons for this show is that I want to help you sort through the chaos, sort through the smoke and mirrors, and discover what is actually real. Personally, I've had some sit-down meetings, direct phone calls with both Attorney General Drummond and Mike Mazie, discussing their priorities, who they really are. That's a big part for me, and I think a lot of Oklahomans, is we want to know who they really are. Who are you? I know what you're saying, but I want to know who you really are. What do you believe? What are your principles, your values? Because that's ultimately what will determine the policies they push. But we're going to be watching that gubernatorial race unfold. On top of that, we have another very important one here in Oklahoma with our educational outcomes at the bottom of the tank, the bottom of the nation, according to some surveys, according to some rankings. Of course, I've already expressed my doubts of those rankings, of how they're funded and who's leading, who's organizing these studies that are ranking the states. Of course, states do education differently. Every state does it differently. So how do you compare apples with apples? I don't think that these rankings tell the whole story. Nonetheless, we know that we need a lot of work here in Oklahoma. We have to improve education. Education is the future of Oklahoma, how we pour into and invest in our children. And so the superintendent race is critical to this. We need good leadership in our educational system here in Oklahoma. And the runoff right now is between Robert Franklin and Dr. James Taylor. Now, issues critical and important to Oklahomans across the state include parental choice, reducing administrative bloat, expanding career tech pathways, and getting kids back to basics instead of screens and ideology. Oklahomans, they're looking for a superintendent who puts students and parents first, not the system. Now, on the workforce and labor front, we also have the runoff for Commissioner of Labor, between Kevin West and John Pfeiffer. And of course, this will shape policies that protect Oklahoma workers, enforcing labor laws, and ensures our economy serves families, not endless regulation. It's something I highlighted throughout my campaign over the last year, is how highly regulated Oklahoma remains. According to a 2024 study, it ranked Oklahoma as 17th in the nation as one of the most regulated states. I believe the number was 142,313 regulations on the books. These are all the ways that the state tells businesses that you cannot do this, you're prohibited from doing this. All the ways that we handicap business owners from doing business. And my argument is, how do we boost our economy here in Oklahoma? We'll make it easier for small business owners in particular to do business. Make it easier for them to start up, easier for them to operate, and easier for them to keep the money they make. That's how you boost the economy. So what does this mean? It means limited government. It means getting government out of our businesses, literally, and letting business owners who are offering quality goods and services, meeting real needs in the state, let them do that without government interference. The more we let them do that, the more prosperous our economy will be. And by the way, the more free we will be. And guess what? Freedom is attractive, and that freedom will attract businesses from around the nation. They will be flocking here to Oklahoma where they can live out their dreams without government interference. That is the ultimate dream. So this role of Commissioner of Labor is critical because it addresses a lot of these regulations. I'm supporting Kevin West in this. He has a proven conservative track record in the House of Representatives. I think he would do great in this role. So Kevin West for Commissioner of Labor. Of course, he is in a runoff with John Pfeiffer. Another race we're looking at is Corporation Commission. Well, actually, this is not a runoff. Brad Bowles, he emerged as the Republican choice. And I think this is a good pick, too. I mean, I liked Justin Hornback here as well. I think a good grassroots, common sense guy, but Brad Bowles did come out victorious. And so I think it's going to be a good pick. I think that he understands energy in particular. He comes from a family company that's been involved in oil and gas. So he understands the oil and gas industry, and he's been involved in legislation during his time in the House related to energy regulation in the state. So I think he understands it well. And corporations in general, of course, this doesn't just focus on energy, but also utilities and just generally keeping the costs down for families and farmers. But his task will be how he balances growth with reliable, affordable power. And one of the things I like about Brad Bowles is he's very interested in nuclear, which I have said many times I'm interested in. I think that it is the energy of the future. And so, especially as we look at the emergence of data centers, it's not really the emergence. They've been around for a while. We already have thousands of them here in Oklahoma and in the nation. I wouldn't say thousands in Oklahoma, but thousands in the nations. I think hundreds here in Oklahoma. And a big question around these data centers is how are they going to be powered? Because they require tremendous amount of energy. And of course, we don't want them tapping into the grid, raising everyone's electric rates. The question is, can we force them, mandate that they produce their own power and actually contribute back to the grid? That would be an ideal situation where we could say, actually, these data centers could help Oklahoma. Now, I want them to be 100% American-owned, paying their own way, producing their own energy, not drawing on our water supply or polluting our water supply, restricting them to industrial zones, not stripping prime farm and ranch land, having proper sound barriers. Well, I think under these kinds of regulations and conditions, they could come in, they would be properly regulated so that they could actually benefit. We as a state could benefit from them instead of it just being a leech and a draw on our resources and our energy. But I think Brad Bowles has a pretty good grasp of this, and as Corporation Commission, I'm anxious to see what his plan is moving forward. Another big one is the Insurance Commissioner. It's a runoff now between Bob Sullivan and former State Senator Marty Quinn, who I served with. Both, I think, are great guys. I think I know Marty Quinn maybe a little bit better, having served with him. But Bob Sullivan, I've met him a few times on the campaign trail and seems like a common sense conservative. And I'm curious how this is going to go, because Oklahomans from west to east, north to south are concerned with healthcare costs, property insurance, consumer protections. So we need to see a plan. And that's something, honestly, we haven't heard a lot of from, at least I haven't, from the candidates with an actual plan about how we're going to tackle these rising insurance rates. So this is the question we're all asking is, what is the plan to protect Oklahomans, not the insurance companies? All right, so those are some races I'm watching. Right there at the top is going to be the superintendent race and this commissioner of labor. But I think probably more interest is going to be surrounding the superintendent race. It's directly impacting our educational system and our children. And we're wanting to know, what is the plan for education here in Oklahoma? I think that, this is a clear distinction between the candidates. Robert Franklin is clearly a Democrat who has switched his party affiliation to Republican to run for this seat. We have massive support from a lot of the teachers groups who are rallying, even encouraging Democrats to change over to Republicans. We're seeing this on some online threads, that there's a big push for a lot of Democrats to change their affiliation to vote for Robert Franklin and Drummond. So, lots of people are concerned about this and just how does this impact the integrity of our elections. I'm less concerned about those who are switching parties to try to manipulate the outcome of a vote. I'm less concerned about them. I'm more concerned about the true conservatives who are going to kick their feet up and not do anything. I'm more concerned about the pastors who will remain silent and not encourage their congregations to get out and get active. Because I'm telling you, if we had our churches show up and exercise their voice, and I would argue be a steward of the freedom God has entrusted us with, if we just saw the churches, just saw the pastors rise up and get engaged, then the Democrats changing affiliation to influence the outcome of a race would be minimal. I'm not concerned about that. What we need is a greater voter turnout from the conservatives. So that's what I'm pushing for. It's a clear distinction here in the superintendent race between Franklin and Taylor. Taylor being the true conservative. Of course, we're already seeing the comparisons being made between Taylor and former state superintendent Ryan Walters. I don't make that comparison. I think they hold a lot of the same values, but the approach is very different, and the approach is very critical. I agreed with a lot of what Ryan Walters did and said and attempted. But I think the complaint many had with Ryan Walters was his approach. I mean, you have to be willing to sit at the table and discuss ideas, debate ideas, not try to ram issues down people's throats, which is, I think, how a lot of people felt. So we need more clarity, more conversation before policies are attempted, before rules are rammed through. We need a good relationship between the superintendent and the State Board of Education. It doesn't mean that they agree on everything. This is a critical part of the checks and balances. I know recently there was a conversation about an attempt to move the superintendent from an elected position to an appointed position under the governor. I'm not for that. I want to keep the superintendent position an elected position so that we have a check and balance. You have the Board of Education appointed by the governor, and you have the state superintendent elected by the people, keeping that separation between the two so there can be healthy debate and checks and balances. We need that. So, but you also need the ability of the superintendent to work with the board. So I'm hoping that we can have that, and in good appointments. This is where the governor comes in. We need the right person at the helm here in Oklahoma so that they can appoint the right board that will reflect the conservative values of Oklahomans and work with the state superintendent to actually move the needle when it comes to education in the right direction. The needle has been moving just in the wrong direction. We need to reverse that trend, start producing true academic outcomes that are showing that kids can graduate not just being able to read. See, I'm not looking at moving from 50th to 40th, meeting the bare minimum. I want to move to the top, where we're not just proud that kids can read when they graduate, but we actually can claim that they can start businesses. They can go to work making good money on their way to start their own business, employ people. I mean, this is where I'm looking. How are we developing critical thinkers, entrepreneurs, innovators here in Oklahoma right outside of high school? That's the kind of education I want to be giving our children here in the state. All right, well, that's an overview of some of the races that are coming up. Of course, mark it down. August 25th is the runoff election. You're going to see some of these on the ballot. Show up again. You showed up on June 16th. Some of you did. Show up again August 25th. It's going to be critical. Don't just say, I'll wait till the general. This is going to be critical. Many of these races will be decided August 25th. So show up to vote, and let's get the right people in there to represent us, the people. We the people. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Got to give a quick break to our sponsors, and I'll wrap up after that. All right, guys, welcome back. Jake for the State podcast. Hope you enjoyed the show today. Take a look at the show notes to all of the links to our sponsors. Be sure to check them out. I'm here at Modus Health in Yukon, Oklahoma, here with Dr. Jeremy Moss. Dr. Moss, tell the people what all you guys do here at Modus Health.
So we are a full-service natural health care clinic, chiropractic, acupuncture, functional medicine, nutrition, massage, really anything from a natural, holistic, vitalistic perspective. That's what we do, and so we exist to serve for.
Yukon, Oklahoma, Dr. Jeremy Moss and his team, I know they can help you out. How do they get in touch with you?
Easiest way is just give us a call. So 405-494-0165. You'll call our front desk. We'll get you squared away as soon as we can. Typically, we can work patients in, sometimes even same day, but for sure within the same week, we'll get you in and get you feeling better soon.
Also, remember, write it down, August 25th. August 25th is the runoff election, and you showed up on June 16th. Show up again. Make your voice heard, your vote count. All right, guys, I am going to follow these races, do some more interviews with the candidates to come. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.